Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, how in the hell are the Hawks going to get better?
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now. Welcome into ATL Day Ones. You know this face, Tenitra. You know that other face, Jarvis. And you know this face if you check out Locked On Hawks. That's our guy, Brad Rowland, who is the aficionado that we asked to drop by today because we are exactly T-minus 1 day to the NBA draft. I can't believe I'm saying that, Brad, because it seems like we literally just wrapped up the season, which, hey, we actually did if you're a Denver Nuggets fan, right? But anyway, for our Hawks fans, the season is actually just now beginning right at the draft space. So let's start there. Landry Fields had his pre-draft press conference on Friday, and one of the questions that we kind of put out there, I put it out there, a couple of other beat writers put it out there, was kind of getting a feel for two things. And one of the questions I asked him was whether or not he felt like they had a bit of a cheat code as the Hawks because they got to have Quin Snyder there for 22 regular season games and, of course, 3 more. That said, he said, yeah, it is kind of a cheat code because you get him in the process because we know he's going to be a part of the evaluation process. You got him early. So that's kind of the part one. And then the part two was, what do you actually plan to do at 15 and 46? He tried to lean into, we're evaluating talent and we're going to pick whoever we need at 50 and 46. And yes, we need veterans, but yes, we're ready to develop players. Okay, Brad, I think it was like Landry, but smoke and mirrors. What do you think they're doing at 15 and 46?
Yeah, Landry's very good at saying things without saying anything, and I mean that in complimentary fashion. It's part of the job, honestly, especially with the draft. Like, you know, almost no one would come on and say this is what we're going to do about the draft because that's just not what anybody's going to do. So you got to ask the questions, you got to give the answers. I think some of what he said was right. I think the Hawks have a pretty wide range they can go with at 15 in particular because of the roster they have. They have these guys. They have 10 guys who are their top 10 from this last season are still on the team. They're still under contract, and that gives you some freedom. You don't have to pick a position. You don't have to like prioritize one certain thing because they don't really have a gaping hole. That can also be a little bit almost crippling because you can kind of do too many things. It's kind of hard to narrow down sometimes if that's the case, but I think there are probably 6, 7, 8 guys that could probably take at 15, and part of that, like you guys know, is who's going to still be available. Yes. Last year, AJ Griffin fell in their lap. They were not expecting AJ Griffin to still be there when they drafted him. He fell to them. They took him gladly. They were really happy about that, but you can't bank on that either. So it's kind of like a combination of who's going to still be there and also what their board looks like, and it really could be a lot of different things.
That's a good point. I want to just follow up on that because one of the things that's exactly what Landry said, Brad. I mean, literally that they have the flexibility and the freedom to be able to pretty much draft whoever they want because they're not desperate, so to speak, from that draft class or from the perspective of what the 10-man roster looks like en route to 14-man roster. But that said, I kind of feel like, no, you are desperate because this is the second year in a row that you're going into the play-in round, and with the roster that you have and where you are as far as a salary cap and how many salaries you're tied into, you kind of are desperate because you shouldn't be tied into that many salaries and end up exiting the first round that you only got to by virtue of a Heat team that seemingly overlooked you. So I don't know. I just feel like, you kind of maybe are a little bit more desperate, but I also hear what you're saying and I hear what Landry's saying as well. So.
Yeah, I think part of that is that the draft is a different entity than like, for me, I always want to stress, fans think about whoever they draft is going to like plug in for this year and be good right away. But most of the time, especially if you're drafting 15, that guy's not going to be a key piece for you in year one. You're drafting for year 2 or year 3, year 4. I agree with you generally, though. Like they should be not. I mean, desperation is like kind of a tough one, but I'm sure they wouldn't agree with that. But I think you're right. I think you're right, though. Like, given how much money they've spent, given that Tony Ressler has been very hands-on and wants to win, and they're not satisfied with the way the last 2 years have gone. So I do think that it's good to have all your guys under contract, but it's also a little bit limiting in that they want to be a lot better than they've been. And if you just kind of just run it back, that's not going to go over very well. Like when you just look at the last 2 years and how that's gone. So I agree with you, generally speaking. It's just that draft is kind of that weird in-between space where you don't want to be drafting to make yourself better now. It's really about the future, whereas everything else around you, your trades, your free agency, that kind of stuff is to kind of build the team now.
I think I like the word that you use, satisfaction, right? Because I feel like I won't be satisfied if the Hawks actually make the pick. Because here's the thing, I really feel like they are in a space where they're going to have to move. Some pieces going to have to be moved off of this roster in order for them to kind of, I guess, stay up under the luxury tax and not be wearing an apron. You know, I love that term. Actually, like nobody knows what it means. You know, it's like there's a threshold, and that's what they decided to call it. I don't know why they decided to call it an apron, but hey, it is what it is. But I think that for me though, I would like to know from you is, do you feel like the Hawks brass, Nick Ressler, Landry Fields, and whoever is out here running this team, and Tony Ressler, do you feel that they were, and Kyle Korver as well? Do you feel like, and we've now moved Quin Snyder because he said he has no personnel situation going on, so that's another thing, but we'll get to that in a second. But my question is, do you feel like the Hawks brass will be satisfied if they're able to somehow figure out a way to get rid of one of these contracts that they know they have to get rid of, and then, be able to bring back some type of, bench rotational type talent and not make this pick on tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that's one of the scenarios for sure, is that I think it's not a secret the Hawks are more expensive than they want to be. I'm a big fan of, like, you shouldn't be, if you're a fan, you shouldn't be okay with that. Like, you should want them to spend. Like, it's always funny to me when fans are like, well, they have to get on the luxury. I'm like, why? Why do they have to get on the luxury? So anyway, but yeah, they could use this pick to make their life a little bit easier cutting salary. Because look, it's really hard. It's not impossible, but it's really hard to make your team better while also getting cheaper. Does that make sense? Yeah, like it's a really, really hard needle to thread. And when what we just said, they're desperate to get better. When you're desperate to get better and you are desperate to get cheaper, like, that's really, really hard. And one of the ways to do that, if they want to kind of do that, is to use your draft picks to entice other teams to help you get cheaper while also not making your team worse. So obviously when we say that, we're talking about guys like John Collins, like Capela, maybe. Those guys are making real money. And while they're still good players, they have, Collins has been on the block forever. You guys know that. Capela's got a Kongwu behind them. Those are the two obvious names to kind of get moved if they want to get cheaper and change the roster. They could make bigger changes too. But yeah, 15 should be very available, honestly. Like, they kind of need that pick to stay cheap, because first-round picks are actually cheap, and that's part of the appeal of them. AJ Griffin's going to be signed for very little money for the next 3 years after this. There's a lot of value to that. Right. But they also have value in the league if you want to make a big trade to improve your team now. So it's that's that fine line you have to walk. And the only person that can really answer the question, you name a lot of people there. Tony Ressler is the one that really makes that call, to be honest. They have all these front office people. Landry's the GM, Nick, Kyle, etc., Quin. But Tony, I think even more than a lot of owners, is very hands-on, and he's going to be the one that makes the final call. And that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's the one cutting the check.
Yeah, and I think that's at the end of the day that makes all the sense in the world, like, because if you're a guy, obviously I feel like you hired basketball people to do basketball things, but ultimately those guys got to be able to present their case and say, hey, here's why this is going to work. Here's who's going to be involved that needs to make it work, and like we should go this route. Now, that's up to Tony Ressler, but I wholeheartedly feel that Tony will, if it makes sense for him, I think that he'll go along with whatever Landry Fields comes up with. But I think that, and I'm glad you brought up John Collins, because here's the thing, like we say, he's been in those rumors ever since he signed that contract, which is so weird to me. Like, how you sign an extension and then the trade rumors start to go up seemingly. But do you, and Tenitra I have talked about on our show as far as John Collins and DeAndre Hunter potentially not being on this roster next year. Let me ask you, do you feel like that's the case? Do you feel like John Collins is going to finally be traded? And do you feel like DeAndre Hunter is in a lot more conversation than he probably needs to be?
Yeah, as far as Collins, I'm not going to make the mistake of saying he's definitely going to get traded, because people have done that before. And I've never quite gone there. There were times where I was like, okay, it's probably going to happen. I think probably, but not definitely, is where I'll say about Collins, because it all comes down to how urgently they want to trade him. To this point, he's been available. They've kind of wanted to trade him, but they weren't willing to take that next step to be like, okay, we're doing this no matter what. Like, they've not gotten to that point. They've still been asking for a lot for him at different times, and they've held back. If this is the summer where they're like, okay, now we're really doing this now, they can trade him. I have no doubt about that. They can get rid of him if they want to. That's separate from my opinion. I think John is better than most people think that he is, but it is what it is. He's very available. Hunter is the one that, honestly, I will fully admit, I don't really know. It's tough for me to say that, but because he was very highly regarded by the previous front office. Travis traded up for him. Right. He was certainly someone who I think was not like on the level of Trey when it comes to being unavailable, but the Hawks did not want to trade DeAndre Hunter. Now he's been paid. He's making a bunch of money moving forward, and Travis isn't here anymore. And I don't have a read just yet on how Landry and Kyle and Quin feel about DeAndre Hunter, which leaves a lot of uncertainty for me. Like, on one hand, you have AJ behind him, you have Sadiq Bey, you have even Jalen maybe playing some three in the future. You could be willing to move off of DeAndre Hunter. On the other, he's still probably your best perimeter defender right now. He's a guy you just paid. To your point about Collins, like, you just paid Hunter a year ago too. So there's conflicting stuff there. So the way that I've been saying is, I'm pretty sure that at least one of Collins and Capela is going to get moved. I'll be surprised if they're both still on the team in a month. Hunter is the real question mark for me, because it really depends on how this group feels about him. And we haven't had a chance to kind of see in a transactional way how Quin and them feel, because when he was extended, it was still Travis. Travis was still here. And now that was the last time, like the last pivot point we saw with DeAndre, and now it's a different group. So I'm not sure how they feel about him.
We will continue with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks. But first, got to tell you that today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You guys have been rocking with ATL Day Ones for a long time, and really appreciate you for that. Here's my only ask now. I'm going to ask you that you go over to FanDuel Sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Yes, $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. Also, you guys are the Braves are super hot right now. They are on a heck of a win streak. So if you want to win some money, go check out the Atlanta Braves and see what they have right there just for you. So don't miss your chance to snag a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and you have those three positions that really and truly all three need to be upgraded, if we're being honest. And the individuals who are right behind DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Clint Capela aren't necessarily the upgrade that you need now. Not to say that, like you said, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson, or even a Sadiq Bey won't be that, because we've seen situations where Quin, Snyder, everyone from a Donovan Mitchell all the way up to a Royce O'Neal, where he's taken talent and he's helped them to evolve into something that before him, maybe you wouldn't have thought that talent could be. That said, what I kind of want to do for the next couple of questions, Brad, is treat this conversation like a couple things are true, even if they're not true. A couple things are true, at least as we know them today. Number one is, let's assume that Tony Ressler is finally okay with going over the luxury tax. He sees the apron window at 117, I think it is, and says, yeah, okay, fine. And he sees the next tier of apron as well. And he's okay with that because he knows, hey, I've got to get 2 world beaters. Let me just set this up before I ask my question. The reason I say 2 world beaters is because, okay, Brad, go back 2 seasons. And they thought they were okay because, hey, this team took us to the Eastern Conference Finals. Well, guess what? That non-move cost you big time, right? You ended up in the play-in round. Okay, so the next season you go and make 1 move to get a world beater in DeJounte Murray. That wasn't enough, because guess where you landed? In the play-in round again. You won 1 more game in the first round, but that really doesn't count because you still exited. So now you're at the point, especially when you look at some of the templates, not the Nuggets template, but some of the other templates that get you there, and it's that true like big 3, maybe even a big 4. Here's what I'm teeing up, because I want to go and I'm going to keep going at all 3, 4, and 5, right? I like the possibility of moving. I think one of the things I put into Jarvis and I had to do a stream earlier this month, and it was putting DeAndre Ayton in a situation where he could come here. We move Clint Capela. You take the 2 draft picks if that's what you got to take. Just do whatever you got to do, because that's probably the guy you're going to get, unless you get, and forgive me for forgetting his name, the center in Seattle. Reason I bring it up again here, Brad, is because of the blockbuster deal that is on the table for the Suns, where Booker, Durant, and Beal are going to be your big 3 in Phoenix. I think Ayton's going to be the odd man out. So what is it? First of all, do you feel like he's viable for the Hawks? And second of all, what do you feel would be the thing that the Hawks have to do to get him here, whether that's a 2-team situation or a 3-team, where some of the sources have said you might have to bring in a team like the Pacers and possibly mix a Miles Turner in?
Yeah, it's interesting because Phoenix is going to be spending so much money on those 3 guys. And they don't seem to care about that. But as far as like logistics are concerned, Ayton makes a good chunk of money too. And I think that if you're Phoenix, you kind of need a center. Like, you can't just trade Ayton and not have a center back. So maybe it's just that they get Clint in this scenario. And he's probably more of what they need, honestly. Clint doesn't need the ball. They have these 3 guys who all need the ball now, and it's not a Phoenix podcast, but like Clint kind of checks those boxes. Like, he's a very low maintenance person. So maybe that's what it is. You send Clint to Phoenix, you bring in DeAndre Ayton. I'm kind of mixed on Ayton. I'm not as high as some, but he is young. He is very talented. I think he's going to be probably better in his next stop than he's been in Phoenix, just because of the logistics around that. Maybe that'll be Atlanta, and it's a bigger swing for sure. I also think that while this probably isn't the reason why you're bringing it up, I think Ayton being a little bit more versatile on offense might let you do a couple different things. Even like, let's just say for a second, you could keep Collins under that scenario. It's a little bit easier to do that. I'm not saying that's why you asked, because I don't think it is, but part of the issue with Collins and Capela is the lack of versatility from Capela. You're kind of making Collins into this floor spacer that he's really not. So anyway, long story short, I think Ayton would be a good kind of maybe buy low right now. I think his value right now is kind of at a low point where I think it's probably going to go up. I don't love DeAndre Ayton, but if you want to make a big change, that wouldn't be the worst way to do it, because he kind of fits your timeline. He's not 30. He's 24 years old. Yep. So if you think you can kind of rehabilitate him a little bit, have Quin Snyder kind of, up his value a little bit, that might make some sense.
Oh, no, Brad, you're dead on. It was that the fact that he's at his low point where you might be able to get him cheaper than you would have last season or even 2 seasons ago. And listen to this stat that I saw. I thought this was 2 stats that are crazy. Of course, the free throw stat, because he shoots at 76% a clip. Okay, Capela, CC's at 53%. But to me, it was the 3-pointer. Clint is 0 for 4. He's only taken 4 3-point attempts in his entire career, at least in Ayton. While 25% is not a whole heck of a lot, it at least tells you that, to your point of spacing the floor and having a big man that's not afraid to kind of go out to the perimeter with a little bit of help from the likes of a Kyle Korver, maybe you can get that out of him. So no, you were going right up my alley in both those directions.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that, it's going to have to be very interesting, because with the trade for Bradley Beal, I want to kind of bring this up because I came across a tweet, Brad, that I thought was very interesting, right? They were talking about how there are going to be some teams who are going to make some essentially some dumb moves in this offseason, because everybody's trying to become a contender. So there's going to be a lot of movement. And I saw you kind of agree that Atlanta might be in that space. So what deal or what trade, if the Hawks were to make that particular trade, make a trade that you would look at and you say, you know what, they might end up regretting this one?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I said that is what we talked about earlier. It's if you get in a situation where, and I don't know this to be true, but if you're mandated to cut money, you can be in a situation where you're desperate, and that's when you make mistakes. Not that there's going to be a single move that submarines your franchise. You're not gonna, let's say you trade John Collins for a not great return. That's not gonna just kill you. John's not the kind of guy that's gonna be suddenly become a top 20 player in the league and really embarrass you like that. He's really good, I think, but it's not gonna be like an all-time blunder. But if you're again more than willing and maybe eager to cut salary, you're prone to a mistake, because that becomes the goal versus making your team better. And I think generally desperation is not where you want to be. I mean, there's rumblings around the league. I don't know if this is true, but some teams view the Hawks are kind of a mess. like over the last 6 months to a year. And maybe that's different with Quin Snyder in place now. Quin is certainly a stabilizing factor, but that's been the rep of the Hawks around the league, is like that team's kind of a dysfunctional mess right now. So why don't we just like try to pick them apart? That's not where you want to be, man. You don't want to be a situation where like you're the team that organizations are targeting in trades. So maybe that changes now, but that's kind of where my guard's up a little bit because of these conflicting incentives. It's kind of, you can be prone to making a mistake, and not that the Murray trade was a mistake, but I think they overpaid for DeJounte Murray. Just asset wise, and
Slanks also too.
So exactly. So it's one that's a semi recent example where like I think the Spurs kind of knew they had them over a barrel. The Hawks were kind of again, I don't want to overuse the word desperate, but they were kind of eager to make that trade, and that kind of led them to overpaying by a little bit. And that's a spot where you don't want to be. You want to have the leverage, not be facing a team that has leverage over you.
I think
that is, and then given how this is a young front office too, or inexperienced front office as well, so of course teams going to give you a call because they think they can take advantage of that. Real quick, Brad, we didn't get a chance to talk to you, after the changes were made to go over to Quin Snyder. I'm just curious as to what you feel, your assessment of Quin Snyder in that small sample size of games that we got a chance to take a look at as far as how he was dealing with the team.
I love that hire, number one. I think that was a great move. It was a little bit odd the way it all came down. Like, you don't usually see a guy get hired like that in February, but credit to them. And I think Tenitra even asked about it in that press conference on Friday. Like, it was intentional, it seems. Like, they wanted that extra time to have him in the building. Also, sneakily, if they knew, and maybe they had anticipated this, like a quarter of the league had openings in April and May. Yes. I'm not sure they would have got Quin Snyder. I think Quin might have been going somewhere else if he wasn't already in the building. So I'm not sure that's the case, but it's definitely, you're not battling with everybody else if you go ahead and do that now. But anyway, I like the deal when it happened. I think he put his stamp on the team a little bit. It's hard, and I was trying to warn people a little bit about this. Like, nobody can come in and bring their whole system with them in the middle of a season. Like, he's going to need a training camp and an off season to kind of put everything in. But offensively, in particular, you kind of saw what he was capable of doing with this group. And it's a little bit better pace. It's more three, all that stuff. And I think it fits what they do a little bit better, I think, especially with the backcourt they have. So, in short, I like the move. I think he's a good coach. He's proven to be that. And it gives them a little bit of a fresh start in a way that if they can't do a major overhaul, you can at least sell it to yourself and to the fans. Like, hey, by the way, this coach is going to fix the stuff that was the problem already with this roster. That may not be true all the way around. Like, he's only one guy. Coaches can't fix everything in the NBA. It's still a players' league, but he can do some stuff to unlock them.
Yeah. And I'll wrap with two questions that are kind of rapid fire. So the first question from a free agency perspective, the second from a draft. Free agency perspective, assuming that moving parts are what they are, right? And when the dust settles, who potentially is the odd man out? Meaning, wow, he's out of here and we can't believe that because of all the potential. Is that an AJ Griffin? Is that a Jalen Johnson? Or is that an Onyeka Okongwu? So that's part one, Brad. And then part two is, if the Hawks happen to keep 15 and or 46, where do they go?
Yeah, I mean, the three young guys is tough because, I think that if I had to choose one of them to not be here long term, and that's hard because I think they probably will all be here if I had to guess, probably Jalen, but only because, I think AJ is number one. They love AJ. They just drafted him. I think he's going to be a guy they build around. And Onyeka, I think it's more likely they move on from Clint and kind of go to Onyeka than it is the other way around. So I'll choose Jalen, even though I think they like Jalen too, and they should. He's a really talented player. As for 15 and 46, I mean, it's tough to pick one guy at 15, but if I had to pick one guy, I think Cason Wallace is the one that I probably would pick from Kentucky. He's been mocked there a lot recently. Yeah. I think he fixes some stuff for them. Not immediate. You don't want to overstate the immediate fix because he's a rookie, but perimeter defense is a huge need for this team. So between that and the pedigree there, I'll go with him. And 46 is I have no idea what's going to happen. I have a list. I have a list of guys, but even last year, the Hawks made the pick on Tyrese Martin, right? But they traded down. They traded down before that. So that's the wild, wild west in that range of the second round. There'll be 10 trades in that range, and I have no idea. So 15, more confidence. 46 is. I do think though, they're going to want to sign. They're going to want to draft somebody there to have another cheap contributor. So like, I don't know who that guy's going to be, but I think they will probably make a pick in the second round just to kind of get down their books.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, it's interesting because if we're talking NFL, that second round is like, it's just starters. It's almost as valuable as the first round. We talk about the NBA, everybody's like, there's a second round. So, but yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I think I would agree with you as well that it would be best if all three of those players can be retained. But if you have to retain one that can actually evolve into what centers look like in this current NBA, it would be 00. So thank you so much, Brad, for stopping by. Guys, if you want all the deets, especially as we creep up to draft and free agency, please check out Locked On Hawks with Brad Rowland. Everydayers, he should be your everydayer as well. Stop. But also, of course, ATL Day Ones, always stop by and let us know what you guys think. Like, we're very intrigued to hear what you think. Do you think that those three young, fresh, talented guys are going to be retained? 00, JJ, AJ. What are the Hawks going to do? Is this finally the time where we're going to say, okay, bye to number 20? And what are the Hawks going to do? Is it going to be big splash time in free agency? So don't forget, wherever you download your podcast, that's where you should download ATL Day Ones and Locked On Hawks, and check us out on YouTube as well and drop a comment. We'll see you next time.